Who in their right freaking mind thought it would be a good idea to crank up the heat in Ohio? You see my skin? I am always as white as my bookshelves. Like, you see this book? Watch this. Gone. It blended in. So when I go out into the sun, I just turn into a nice, beautiful shade of lobster red. Hey everyone, my name is Holly, and in today's video I am going to be doing my June wrap-up. So as most of you know, I decided to not do a TBR challenge, and I actually read books that I really wanted to get to, and I am so incredibly happy that I did that. I read some pretty good books this month. So let's go ahead and start with the first one, and that was Sinlin Ascends by Josiah Bancroft. Now I do have a full spoiler-free review that goes way more into depth about this book, and I'll link that down below for you or on the screen as well. If you are at all interested in this book, I would highly recommend going to watch that video, because I feel like I will sway you even more to pick it up. So this is an adult fantasy that follows our main character Thomas Sinlin, and he is a school headmaster of a very small town, and him and his wife Mara decide to go honeymooning to the Tower of Babel. Unfortunately, they get separated from one another within the crush of crowds. Sinlin is very determined to find his wife, and the only way to do that is if he enters the tower, which is a very mysterious, dark, and pretty astonishing place. I am so incredibly lucky to have had the chance to read this brilliantly imaginative novel by Josiah. Like, oh my gosh, it is fantastic. Now this novel caught me and it hooked me immediately from the start. Now this book really delivers, except for one possible minor issue for me. First off, the world building in this is absolutely stunning. The world of the tower is so vivid, it practically jumps off the page. As far as I'm concerned, this tower is basically a character on its own. It has an unknown number of ringdoms filled with geniuses and tyrants and just people trying to scrape by. By the way, a ringdom in this book is basically a kingdom of each level. I guess you could think of it as like layers on a cake. Now my only issue with this book is that you can't go into it hoping for a lot of action. It's definitely not about that. And because of that, there is just a little bit of a slow spurt in the middle, but the longer that I sit down and think about those slow moments, the more I appreciate them. And I ended up giving this one 4.5 out of 5 stars. Again, go watch my review where I go more in depth about it. It is absolutely fantastic. It's for sure a hidden gem. So after reading that book, I immediately picked up the second novel, which was Arm of the Sphinx by Josiah Bancroft. Now this takes place immediately after the events of Sinlin Ascends, and we enter yet again into the tower with its really quirky and dangerous and unpredictable levels. Now without spoiling anything, the first book was definitely about Sinlin and its obstacles throughout the tower, and also meeting different characters. Well, in this book, rather than just focusing entirely on him, we actually get different perspectives of those characters that we meet. That's right, we actually get to follow a crew in this book, and oh my gosh, they are my heart and soul. And they sail the skies on their airship, and it's just so magical. Now this sequel is definitely a lot more lighter and a lot more humorous as well, especially since we have all of these different characters who have very distinct personalities, and there's a lot of funny banter between them, and it's just so heartwarming. Now the mysteries that were birthed in Sinlin Ascends definitely become way more complicated in this one, and every single answer that you might get in this book comes with like a million more questions. And I am desperately trying to figure out how to alter time and space so that I can get that final third book, which got freaking pushed back to January, by the way, which makes me so freaking sad. But I ended up giving this one 5 out of 5 stars. I enjoyed it far more than Sinlin Ascends, and I loved that book. Like, this one was just everything that I could have wanted. So after that, the next book on my TBR was Gunslinger Girl by Lindsay Ellie. This book, you guys, lies. all lies. Okay, let's start from the beginning. So Pitty Jones, the main character, ends up running away from her home and from her abusive father and winds up in this lawless Las Vegas-ish city where she basically gets taken into a circus act as a sharpshooter. That's right, circus. The synopsis says theater, but no, it's 100% a circus. You know that saying, run away from home to join the circus? Well, that actually should have been the tagline for this book. I mean, the whole circus thing would have been fantastic if the characters were so thinly sketched out as they were. You barely got a sense of them. Every single character has the exact same personality. In fact, there was a character that I thought was a girl the entire novel until the very end. The character was called a he, and I was like, oh, whoops. That totally jostled my brain. The main thing that really frustrates me about this book is that there is really not a whole lot of Western Wild West stuff happening, which is why I picked it up and bought it actually. I expected like a deserty environment with saloons, maybe horse-drawn carriages, and tumbleweeds and cowboys, but that's not what I got. Now the only thing Western about this book is the fact that the main character wields 2 revolvers, and on this cover it shows her wearing a cowboy hat, but I don't even think that was mentioned in the book. Also, Pitty herself, I just could not get a handle on what type of character she was. Sometimes she's a fierce, take no bullcrap gunslinger, and then the next scene she's weeping and crying and complaining. In fact, her entire arc becomes very dependent on a very undeveloped romance that's supposed to have like this major driving factor. That's gonna be a no for me. So I ended up giving this one a very unfortunate 2 out of 5 stars. I do think a lot of people will enjoy this if they give it a chance, but for me personally it just didn't work. So the final book that I ended up finishing this month was The Doll Maker of Krakow by R.M. Romero. Now this is a middle grade that takes a very honest look at the Holocaust while also weaving in a story of fantasy and magic. And it mostly follows our main character Carolina, who lived quite happily in the land of dolls until the rats invaded. Her peaceful existence was shattered as the rats rained terror on her home. When things are looking their bleakest, Carolina actually wakes up inside the real-life city of Krakow, where she then meets the doll maker who accidentally brought her to life. At first, the doll maker is quite shocked that this doll can speak to him, but he then accepts the magic and friendship from Carolina. So eventually the doll maker and Carolina end up befriending a Jewish family, which consists of a father and daughter who live pretty close by, and they are so lovely. The doll maker treasures their friendship, but unfortunately their happiness is very short-lived. The German army invades Poland and the Jewish family are immediately put under really strict restrictions just because they are Jewish. The doll maker wants to desperately help his friends, but what can one man and one doll do against an entire army? I guess you'll have to read it to find out. I adored this book, and I think what really helps it is that the narrative actually switches between Carolina and when she lived in the land of dolls and the rats invading her land, and then it switches back to the real-life war between the Germans and Krakow. Now this is a very sad story and I wouldn't recommend reading it in public, that's for sure. I made that mistake. Now I've never really read a book about World War II and about what life was like under the Nazi occupation because, well, I know how it will end, and that's me a slobbering mess. Despite like the fanciful elements of the story, like there being a talking doll and other characters that make it kind of a funny, lighthearted story, this is a very realistic portrayal of those times. Like the desperation of the doll maker who just doesn't know how to help, the slow degradation of the Jewish people, and just many more elements in this were done so well. And I ended up giving this one 4 out of 5 stars. I highly recommend picking this one up and trying it out. I did devour this in one day. Alright, so that was my June wrap up. I think I had a pretty good month. I had a nice variety of books. I had adult, I had YA, I had middle grade. But let's go ahead and jump into my July TBR, because I have started a book already and I'm enjoying it so much that I kind of want to devour the whole trilogy, and that is The Blade Itself by Joe Abercrombie. Now I am about halfway through this and I love it so much. Now this isn't a wrap up, but all I have to say is I'm trash for Joe Abercrombie. Now my initial thoughts of this is that it definitely feels like everything is a prologue, but I am so obsessed with these characters. I could literally read like an everyday life story of them. So the story starts off with introducing us to 3 characters, one of them being Logan Ninefingers, who is my absolute favorite. He is so funny. And the other one is Inquisitor Glocta, who is kind of a creepy torturer. And then there is Giselle, who is an upcoming soldier training for a tournament. And all the while you are following these 3 characters, there is a war raging upon all of these kingdoms, like pretty much all of them. I am absolutely devouring this so far. It is so good, and I expect to finish it within a couple days, if not have already finished it by the time this video goes up. And because I am enjoying it so much, I am going to also read book 2, which is Before They Are Hanged, and also the 3rd and final book, which is Last Argument of Kings. Actually, I shouldn't say final book, because then there's also the 2nd trilogy that is part of the First Law series, which I own, by the way. So here is my July TBR, possibly. I'll probably add a couple books in between, like some really short books I can get through quickly, because I might need some variety. But yeah, that's my July TBR. And that is it for this video. I really hope you guys enjoyed. Tell me down below some books that you read in June, or some books that you plan to read in July, because I would love to know. Go ahead and subscribe to this channel if you haven't already, and follow me on social media. All my links are down below. And until we meet again, happy reading.